My name is Tom Pavone. I'm a BA student here at the Ford School, and the title of my project is Appeasing the Xenophobes, the Impact of Political Patronage on Italian Center-Right Immigration Policy. What I wanted to look at is, in Italy, there's a gap between immigration rhetoric by center-right parties and immigration policies. And I was trying to find a way to theoretically explain this. So the Italian electorate is extremely xenophobic, and the center-right has mirrored this in their rhetoric, but in their policies they've been adopting very moderate policies. And what I try to show in this project is that there is a theoretical argument for political patronage explaining this. That is, that center-right parties diffuse private goods to their electorate, they appease their xenophobic preferences through this, and then they no longer care about the policies that they adopt. So they're able to stay in office even though they don't mirror the preferences of the electorate. Well, the interesting thing about this, the biggest policy implication is, if what I'm saying has some backing, if it's plausible, then corruption is actually a good thing when it comes to immigration policy in Italy. Because if you didn't have the ability for center-right MPs to diffuse private goods to their constituents would hold them accountable and they'd be forced to adopt xenophobic immigration policies. So that's really the most pertinent policy implication. It's more about what goes into policy more so than in a policy recommendation. In this case, a sort of implicit, weird recommendation is we should sort of hold back before we think about criticizing corruption in Italian politics, because there could be some positives out of it. The big thing is I didn't expect to find this gap between rhetoric and policy. But one interesting statistic that I discovered is that it is estimated that almost 1 million Italian citizens make their living solely off of the system of corruption. They have no other form of income, they just sort of exploit the corrupt system. So it's an interesting statistic there.
Okay.
I'm Caroline Lai, and I'm a first year in the MPP program. And the title of my research is Health Implications of Energy Policy in Sub-Saharan Africa and China. So we were given the assignment of trying to research a non-health policy area and for socioeconomic and health policy with Professor House and its health implications. So I chose to research energy policy in China and Sub-Saharan Africa because I had interned at the Department of Energy a couple years ago, and I'm really interested in especially Sub-Saharan Africa. And then he had brought up the point that China is very dependent on coal. I first set out to figure out exactly what were the types of energy that are the predominant forms, and basically how they're being used and what types of negative health implications there are. And so for China it was somewhat easy to find this information, and I saw that I think it's something like 60% of their energy comes from coal, and especially with China's increasing population, they're just becoming more and more heavily dependent on it, and they have really negative health implications due to the air pollution, because they don't really necessarily adhere to the standards that they're supposed to. It was kind of difficult trying to figure out what figures to really believe. The Chinese government was giving far different numbers than maybe WHO and places like that. And then for Sub-Saharan Africa, I had lived in Ghana as a Peace Corps volunteer, so I knew that predominantly I was lucky to have electricity, but a lot of people I knew didn't have any sort of electricity at all. And so they're very heavily dependent on biomass fuels like wood, charcoal, that type of thing. And so I wanted to know what types of health implications there are. And mainly it negatively affects women and children far more than men, just because traditionally women and children, or girl children, are the ones that have to cook and take care of the home. Because of the way that they cook, it's usually done within the confines of their own home with no chimney, and due to it there's high levels of indoor air pollution. And then also what I thought was really interesting was just the way that African women carried their babies is just tied with a piece of cloth. They're on their backs, and because of it, even when they're cooking, and I saw this when I was in Ghana, a lot of the times these women are over these stoves and the babies are on their back, and and it's really sad. And I found some statistic that said, like, of all the indoor air pollution fatalities, I think 56% of them are of children under the age of 5. So they're not the ones that are actually cooking or anything like that. They're just on their mom's back.
My name is Jennifer Williams, and the title of my project is The End of an Era, the Case of Public Housing in Atlanta. I'm originally from Atlanta, Georgia, so this was an issue very close to home for me. Some of my goals in doing this research were really to give a voice to the many public housing residents who have been displaced by recent legislation to get them out of the urban core, so to speak, and place them into the private market for housing through the use of Section 8 housing vouchers. So one of the catalysts for the ending of public housing in Atlanta was really the 1996 Olympics that demolished Techwood homes that you see here on my board and replaced it with Centennial Place right there in Centennial Olympic Park, that area. And currently, well, actually last summer, Bowen Homes, a public housing residence for families and senior citizens, was recently demolished. And the key players here are the Atlanta Housing Authority and also the Atlanta Task Force for the Homeless. And the Atlanta Housing Authority really views this as a way to deconcentrate poverty out of the urban core and then kind of disperse individuals throughout the city. And the Atlanta Task Force for the Homeless views it really as public housing residents should have alternatives before their communities are officially demolished. So those are some of the major implications. I really wanted to raise awareness to this issue, largely like the demographics, predominantly female-headed households, predominantly African-American communities, and you drive from the center of Atlanta, like the Centennial Olympic Park area, and then just a little further west, and very dilapidated area. And as you can see with Bowen Homes, it's all boarded up. So recent legislation is the 2009 Voucher Reform Act, and that has really helped to put more money into giving low-income people the vouchers that they do need to purchase private housing. So I think once we get more funding into that, we'll probably see some, hopefully, decreases in homelessness and really getting people the housing that they do need and deserve. Over spring break, I went around my city and took some snapshots. And Centennial Olympic Park, it's beautiful, and constructed in 1996 for the Olympics. But just the interesting factor is that it's for affluent members of society. Even Centennial Place, the rent there is so out of range for people who, were displaced by the Olympics, and they're unable to relocate to where they were originally.
My name is Olushola Samuel. I'm a BA, class of 2010, and the title of my project is A Tale of Two States, Provider Taxes in Minnesota and Michigan. Minnesota has had a physician tax since 1992. It is a 2% tax as opposed to the 3% tax in the state of Michigan. Now, they use their tax to provide health insurance to people. 122,000 people each year is what they use their taxes for. It's called MinnesotaCare. So it's different than the Medicaid rates, but again, it's for access. Unfortunately, the Michigan proposal was shot down 32-4 in the state Senate. It was passed in the House, shot down in the Senate. So we're looking at what did Minnesota do right, and why is it a popular program that physicians should actually welcome? As the years have gone by, as you can see on the chart, it has steadily declined, and what that means is that physicians are coming to Minnesota, and that is encouraging. That's an encouraging policy implication. That means that physicians will not necessarily leave the state of Michigan. Minnesota, the physicians actually came to the state, and their population of licensed physicians rose faster than the population of Minnesota residents. That's the most important aspect of my work.
My name is Jessica Goldberg, and the title of the paper is The Supply of Casual Wage Labor in Rural Malawi. This research is attempting to understand the decisions that really very poor people living in a rural community in sub-Saharan Africa make about when they choose to do wage labor. So working off-farm, not working on their own land, but working for other people to earn cash. And understanding how they react to changes in the wages that they're paid. So I started the project after having conducted focus groups with farmers in Malawi, asking about other questions, actually asking about how they choose to invest in different types of agriculture, or the money that they're able to save and to borrow. And something that I heard a lot from these farmers is that wages paid for ganyu, which is the Chichewa term for this type of casual labor, are different at different times of the year, but that contrary to economic predictions, people don't work when wages are highest and save that money to use at some other time in the year. Instead, they seem to work when they need the money, so when something bad has happened in their household. And intuitively, that makes a lot of sense. People work when they need money. But from an economics perspective, it's actually better to smooth your effort. So to work when wages are high, and then save that money to use later on.